Are you one of the 70 million Americans suffering from a sleep disorder? This is Robert Manni, host of Guys TV, and this week my special guest is investigative journalist Scott Carney. We're going to talk all about the science of slumber, and it all starts right here, right now on Guys TV. You can also catch me on KCAA Radio here in Southern California, Guys Radio, my worldwide podcast, and we're on UK Health Radio all weekend long. Guys TV, Guys Radio, thanks for your support. Okay, Guys Radio, it's the interview portion of our show, and we're welcoming in our YouTube and Rumble audience who can watch our interview here. And today we're going to talk about sleep and dreaming and napping and a lot more. Our special guest is an investigative journalist and anthropologist. His name is Scott Carney. I'm thrilled to have him on the show. First time. He's a real guy's guy. He's a really interesting person. He's done some great work. He's worked in some of the most dangerous and unlikely corners of the world. His work blends narrative, nonfiction with ethnography. And I don't even know what that is. But What Doesn't Kill Us was a New York Times best-selling book about kind of the cold immersion and the whole Wim Hof method and more. And also his other works are The Vortex, which is about the great Bola cyclone in Bangladesh that killed 500,000 people. The Wedge, which is about consciousness. The Enlightenment Trap, about how Tibetan Buddhism kind of got hijacked when it came to the West. He also has another book, very interesting, The Red Market, about organ brokers, child traffickers, bone thieves, and blood farmers. But today we're going to talk about his book called Dream. And it's all about, so many Americans have trouble sleeping, but this is about how to sleep, what dreams are, what napping is, and how to get there. And there's some great exercises at the end of the book about yoga nidra, I believe it's called, and some other things. And it's just fantastic. So welcome to Guys Radio for the first time. My special guest, investigative journalist, Scott Carney. How are you, Scott?
Robert, I love being here. Thanks for putting up with me delaying this over and over again because I had the worst cold of my life in the last week.
It's so interesting because I've been tracking you. Scott's he's everywhere in social media, and he was sharing with us his he's had a bad cold, and I actually through that entire time I've had a head cold, but not in the same severity. So what happened with you? What were your symptoms? You had a fever?
I figured it had to be something like COVID, right? But it felt like, all the symptoms seemed right. I lost my smell. I had this just a tidal wave of snot that I mean, more than I think there's this hollow head thing going on. It was more snot matter than brain matter in there. I was just leveled. I haven't been this sick probably in 30 years. Probably not since I was a kid. I just keep on coming up negative for COVID. So it's just a head cold, or maybe the tests are bad or whatever. I am getting out of it. And, it's interesting. I was actually using some of the techniques in the book. There's these guided meditations where, as you sleep, when you're sick, you're really tired, right? Your body's like, I give up. I can barely string thoughts together. And one of the things that's so difficult when you are sick is actually getting good restorative sleep. And I was able to use some of the techniques that I'd learned in my book, which was originally about napping and then became about dreaming, I hope it helped. I mean, it still took me 7 days to recover, but I got a couple of good naps in because of that.
Mm-hmm. Now, are you a believer in supplementation? Did you do extra vitamin C, vitamin D, echinacea, ashwagandha?
I am just pretty much anti-supplement right across the board. I think most of them, I'm of the opinion that, there's a lot of stuff out there. And if you have a real deficiency that's identifiable, like, you have beriberi and your thyroid's gone, or you have a goiter, then there's some definite supplements you should get. Your teeth are falling out from scurvy. Yes, vitamin C. But other than that, I'm not really a supplement guy.
Okay. I am, and the reason is because I don't think the food that we get, for the most part, unless you're eating purely organic, a lot of the other food with the process and everything that's added to it, and the soil, I don't know if the soil has as much nutrients as it has in the past. So with my wife, we kind of cherry pick the supplements we want to take, and do they work or not? I don't know. I feel healthy. I feel good. I feel vital. I do a lot of other stuff too. So,
but anyway, what you're missing in nutrients, you're making up in microplastics in your bloodstream. So that's
that's particularly with the bottled water. People aren't aware of that, how
Oh
many
my God.
microplastics we're getting. But I guess, over time and evolution, we just keep toughening up. So anyhow, let's talk about dreaming. I mean, so many Americans particularly have trouble sleeping. They
Yeah.
can't nap. They have trouble meditating. I know from so many people, I do TM, and so many people I know, they can't quiet their mind from the monkey chatter. Taking a nap is a big effort. They don't sleep all night. And as older they get, it just the stress and everything else. So what was the inspiration, Scott, for you writing this wonderful book called Dream, the Art of Science and Slumber?
Yeah, so it was fascinating. I was hanging out with Brian McKenzie, who's this breathwork specialist who's, I think he's in the Bay Area now. And we were at sort of a performance event in Boulder, Colorado, and somebody asked him, what's your number one tool for recovery? It's like sort of a standard question. And he just sort of threw it out there. It's like, I take naps. And he's like, someone should write a book on naps. And I was the next one, I was like, you know what? I love naps. I love like naps are like one of my favorite things in the world, and they're so underappreciated. And I thought that I would, why don't I write the book on napping, why we should do it, how to do it better, how they really just do make your brain operate, at a higher level and can restore you in the middle of the day. And as I started working on that book, I found out that one, naps are amazing. There's lots of great physiology on why naps are great. But two, there's not much new to say about them, right? Like other than the fact that, hey, you should go take a nap. Like go take a nap if you feel tired, and giving someone that motivation, that is important. But in terms of like how to supercharge or like hack your naps, there's not too much to it. There's probably about four pieces of advice that are really important. I'll just recount them to you now.
Please, please.
Take a nap around 2 or 3 in the afternoon when you start to feel tired. This corresponds with a melatonin dip that we all generally have if you wake up, I know, between 6 and 8 in the morning. That would roughly be 8 hours after you wake up. Take a nap, spend at least 15 minutes, spend 15 to 20 minutes asleep. Or, and this is super important, if you really want to go to sleep, and really get a full rest, spend 90 minutes or more sleeping. Well, a lot of and there's a really interesting biological reason for this. If you sleep for just 15 minutes, you don't actually descend through the various stages of sleep to a place where it's, very deep. You only end up in stage 1 or the beginnings of stage 2 sleep. And those you can get out of very easily. But if you descend into later stages of sleep, it's sort of like right now we're both awake. If I just told you to go to sleep right now, you would have a really hard time doing it. Well, there's sort of this inertia that happens in normal sleep stages where you can't get out of a stage when you're in too deep. So, maybe you've had that experience where you wake up from a nap or sleeping too early and you feel like you're underwater. You're like, oh my God, everything is terrible. That's because you actually woke up in the middle of the 2 or 3 stages, stage
What
2 or 3.
So what are the four? So you mentioned four parts of the sleep cycle, or four cycles within the sleeping. What are they
Right.
for the benefit of everybody listening and watching?
Yeah, well, as we decide, scientists make sort of arbitrary markers on this. And actually, if
Hmm.
you talk to some sleep scientists, there's 3, and some say there's 4, and some say there's 5.
Okay.
Uh, let's say there's 4, right? You have the first one, which is hypnagogia, which is almost being awake. It's like when you put your head down in your pillow, and you've made the intention to go to sleep, and you close your eyes, and you're sort of drifting off, and you're making maybe you're having some weird thoughts, because you're being so abstract. That's called hypnagogia, hypnagogia, and it's the first stage, and it's very light, and you can come right out of it right now if you go into it. And it's even sort of hard to differentiate, like, are you asleep? Are you not? Then we have stage 2 sleep, where you actually do descend down, your body relaxes, your heart, your breathing gets slower, your heart slows down. And then this stage 2 is a sort of a more restful, light sleep. Then you have REM sleep. And again, this is where the stages get confusing. Some say there's a third, sometimes people say there's not. But you have a deep sleep where you're like really off. like your brain is like in the barely doing anything. It's like so deep and so restorative. And if you wake up in deep sleep, it's really hard to get back into awareness. And then there's REM sleep, which is, you've probably heard of REM sleep. This is where your
Mhm.
eyes move back and forth really quickly. And that's a hallmark of what we mostly think of as dreaming. Now, you have dreams in all the stages, but REM sleep, it's like a firework show. The dreams are super active. And REM is really probably the most important for cognition because what happens in REM is where you start to process memories and emotional information that becomes very important for your life as you proceed, when you're awake. And then it's interesting, you don't go from 1, 2, 3 REM and then back out. You actually go 1, 2, 3, 2 REM, uh, 3, 2 REM. I mean, it's not a cycle that's linear.
Mhm.
It sort of has this unique cadence to the sleep cycles. But roughly, they take 90 minutes to complete a full cycle. Is about 90 minutes before you come back up to light sleep, where you can wake up easily. So if you're going to take a nap, aim for a short nap, no more than 20 minutes, or a nap of about 90 minutes so you've completed that full cycle and you won't feel like crap.
So if you take the 20-minute nap, Scott, what are the benefits for that? You don't want to get kind of pulled out of the sleep cycle too early. So what is the significance of the 20-minute or so marker?
Yeah, 20 minutes is just before you're going to descend into stage,
Got it.
a deeper stage of two sleep. You're not so far in on your momentum, your inertia into sleep that you can't come out of it. And what you are doing though is allowing your brain to get abstract. During the day, you are so hyper focused. Like right now, we're talking. You're
Mhm.
looking at me. You're thinking. I hope you're thinking about what I'm saying. Right? You're trying to process my information. That takes a lot of energy and attention. And the culture in the West is to work hard all the time and be focused, 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 focused all the time because we really empower focused thought. That's not always healthy. Like most animals aren't focused all of the time. And it's a lot of strain on the body. So 20 minutes, even if you don't actually fall asleep, even if you just lie down and just say, I'm going to try to zen out, it's hugely beneficial to the way your brain, it just like undoes that tension, not muscle tension, but actually mental tension. It just gives you a break. And in that break, when you go wide, your brain actually starts making novel connections about things. Because when you're focused on any subject, let's say I'm working on a computer program, right? I'm writing a document about sleep. Let's say I'm writing a book about sleep. I'm going to think about topics involving sleep all day because I'm going to be focused on that one thing. But when you actually rest and relax, you might have a thought about sleep coming in. You might have a rhinoceros coming in. You might have a childhood memory, and those sort of random pieces of information that come into your head help you form new creative thoughts. Maybe that thought about a rhinoceros was actually useful in my sleep, but I would never have had it if I wasn't thinking abstractly.
Got it. Now, my special guest on Guys Radio, the amazing investigative reporter and author, Scott Carney. We're talking about his book, Dream. You say that people are sleep deprived. I agree with you completely. How many hours of sleep should we get based on your research?
Interesting you asked that question. So there was this study done, I think it was in 1908, measuring what the average human slept during their day. And it was an epidemiological study. And they found that it was 9 full hours of sleep that happened just every day naturally it was done only in America. It was an American-based study by the National Institutes of Health after the electric light bulb was introduced like 2 years later. So the tungsten filament bulb was a very cheap electric light bulb that was
Mhm.
syndicated all over the planet very cheaply by Thomas Edison. um, they did another study right after that, and they found that humans were getting 8 hours of sleep on average. And so the introduction of electric lighting took away a full hour of normal sleep for people. So now if we measure what the average sleep patterns are for Americans, it's about 7.5 to 8 hours is what we generally will get. But it used to be 9. So physiologically, we should probably be closer to that 9 number. Um, but with that caveat put in there, everyone's physiology is different,
Mm.
and you can't say specifically who, how much one person will get. It's really where you feel rested at the end of that time. And in fact, there are some people will think that they are genetic genetically abnormal, and that they can subsist on like 3 hours of
Yeah,
sleep.
I've heard that.
That's about 1% of the population, or 0.5% of the population. You, dear listener, are probably not that person, and you're just grinding yourself through. Someone who was that person was actually probably Thomas Edison, who really did survive and thrive on low amounts of sleep, which might explain why he created the electric light bulb in the first place.
Now, Scott, can people catch up because we're so busy and we're doing all the
Mhm.
time, and the light bulb has changed how we live and has kind of taken away that special hour of sleep that we need. Can people catch up? Can you like sleep in on the weekend? From your research, does that make a
You know,
difference?
That's actually the standard. Most sleep doctors will say that for every hour of sleep that you miss off of what your body actually needs, and there are ways to test this. You can go to a sleep doctor to tell you what your chronotype is for how much sleep you actually need. But like for every hour that you take off of your sleep cycle, let's say you need 8 and you get 7 hours, you accrue 1 hour of sleep debt. That's the way they phrase it. So and the only way you can pay back a sleep debt is by sleeping for an hour. But it's an additive problem. So if you don't sleep, if you're getting 7 hours of sleep a night, you should be getting 8. At the end of that week, you have 7 hours of sleep debt that you have to pay back with actual sleep and rest. Napping, great way to do it. And the crazy thing is that that can accumulate through for years, which leads
Right.
to
I was
chronic
thinking,
exhaustion.
I was extrapolating
Yeah.
that and like, wow, after 10 years, that's a lot of sleep that we're missing.
Right, right. And I have pushed back on some of these psychologists. I was like, come on, like if I'm 40 years old and can I accrue, 20,000 hours of sleep? That it seems like there's some math that's wrong there in some way. But it's more of like a heuristic. However, eventually, if you accrue so much debt, that you don't pay it back, it turns into chronic illness. It turns into other things in your body just compensating and going wrong.
Mhm. Um, how about meditation? If you, I've been meditating for years, and I just was gifted with by Bob Roth, the CEO of the David Lynch Foundation. He got me into TM, and I've been doing
Mhm.
it, and I love it. 20 minutes twice a day. I have an
Yep.
app. I have a great app. I have a timer, and I feel refreshed. That's my
Great.
20-minute nap, if you will. And sometimes I do drift off, but I get a little bing at the end, and then I slowly come out of it. What's your
Yep.
thoughts on meditation as a substitute for napping? Or is it separate? They
Yeah,
mutually exclusive.
it's a fascinating and very complex question. So TM is one type of meditation, and there are thousands of types of meditation. Um, and a lot of them have very different neurological outcomes for you. TM's a more relaxed version, but there are meditations that are very focused, and you're having these visualizations and you're trying to
Right.
do things, and you can be mentally exhausted after some of these
That's
meditations. So I
true.
wouldn't just put it all in one big box. You sort of have to be a little bit more judicious with what type of meditation you might be doing. I would say, and I'm not a TM practitioner, but Yoga Nidra, which is
Mhm.
a very old meditation, it's actually mentioned in the Rig Veda, which is a very old Hindu text, about 5,000 years old. Um, it means yogic sleep. Nidra means sleep, yoga to join or to yoke. And it is a way of consciously descending into sleep. So you're actually meditating while you are sleeping. And so it's a blending of that unconscious state with the conscious state, which is really, really interesting. Now, other meditations that where you are fully alert as you do it, my experience is that they are not as restorative. Other people have had different experiences than me. This is just my personal allocation here. I will also say that I had this interview recently with Willoughby Britton over at the Britton Lab. She's a neuroscientist at Brown University. And she has said that a lot of longtime meditators stop sleeping altogether, is that they rely on meditation to do their mental processing. And that can have negative side effects on some people, because sleep really is an important um, physiological thing that we evolved with since the beginning of not only humanity, but like
Mhm.
single-celled life forms. Everything sleeps. So if you're not giving your body the restorative cycles that we evolved from, you could be doing damage. And to think that we could consciously with meditative practices outthink what biology does, you might be running into trouble. Then again, I'm not an enlightened master. And if it works for you, then I'm not going to be out here to tell you don't meditate anymore. But I just want to highlight there could
Mm.
be problems.
So yoga nidra, you don't have to be down, if you will. You can be kind of conscious. You're not sleeping.
Yeah.
You're meditating, but you're conscious at the same time. Whereas something like TM, or if you're in your own type of guided meditation, you kind of go down and you're not aware of you know anything besides what you're focused on.
Yeah.
Is that
So
correct?
I can't speak to TM. You are the TM expert.
Okay.
I'm not going to speak to that.
Okay.
I will talk about yoga nidra, which is
Please.
that um, it's bizarre. It's like so awesome. So it's essentially it's becoming aware of your body as you fall asleep, and and then thinking about your body in different ways as you do it. And it's and when you first start, you do it with a playlist, like a YouTube video. And I have a YouTube video on my website, my channel. It's called Yoga Nidra. Go check it out. Um, uh, where you can, where someone just reads you a playlist and you just sort of relax. You lie in your bed and you listen to their words, and they'll tell you that think about your body, do a body scan, think about your toes, think about your knees, think about
Mhm.
your arms, your head. And you go through that and you stretch a little bit, and then they tell you to sink deeper into relaxation. And if you just sort of give yourself over to their voice, and just say, okay, I'll do it, you end up in this state which is very familiar because your brain starts going into the state of sleep, except that you're aware like you are when you're awake. So it's sort of this bizarre moment where you're both asleep physically and yet your brain is aware. And I'd never really had that experience before because like, oh, I've been here so many times before, but I'm actually looking around and being aware of it. And so you have this sort of dualistic moment. And the hope is that since sleep can be so restorative for you, that you're giving sort of subconscious messages to those repairing and restoring processes in your body to accentuate healing or other goals that you might have psychologically. And the science on that, like the hard science in the labs with the guys with the coats, it's not there. Um, but there, I would say anecdotally, I've had really, really good experiences with it.
Now, how long is a session when you're doing that? And do you do it when you're lying down? You're reclining when you're doing this? And do you
In
sometimes
bed.
just fall into sleep for the night then? Or is it a short session and then you go to sleep separately?
Yeah, you can do both. There's many different ways to do it. In general, the typical yoga nidra intro stuff is about a half an hour thing, and you go into these deep states, and then you come back out, and you're guided in and out of those deep states. You could also ignore the playlist, and just as long as it doesn't like fast forward to the next video,
Mhm.
because that would be jarring. Um, then you could sort of continue sleeping. And I feel like you know, I don't like protocols. Like I don't like people telling you this is what you need to do to get your best sleep, to get your best whatever, your the best supplement program, the best
Right.
prayer program, the best way to drive. Like, no, I like people to be able to figure out for themselves and feel their ways through these techniques because it's not like a one size fits all solution machine. It's a thing that you do and you practice. And just let I must remind you, sleeping is enjoyable. Like sleeping actually feels good and you actually like yourself a lot more when you do it. So why not play with it? Like why not have fun sleeping?
My special guest on Guys Radio, the informative and very interesting investigative reporter Scott Carney. We're talking about his book Dream. So let's move to dreaming. Tell us about what do we need to know about dreaming? Why is it important? How does it happen? How can we glean some benefits from it? Is there anything we can do? Lucid dreaming, I remember from reading all the Carlos Castaneda books. I always been trying to like, can I see my hand in my sleep? Can I start to participate more? The whole bit. Talk to us about dreaming, Scott.
Yeah. So I think that we have this scientific problem in the world where we often talk about dreams as if they are nonsense, as if you're just having these things and they're meaningless. It's just flashing of lights in your brain. Or we think these are oracular visions that have intense meaning to them. And the truth is it's neither. It's sort of somewhere in between these two states. There's probably 3 or 4 main functions of dreaming. One is creativity. Remember when I said normally in our day, we're very focused, we're hyper focused on single things. And in the and when we're sleeping, we can be very, very wide. One thing that dreams allow us to do is to make novel connections, really random things. And a lot of times those random, you're running down a street and the terrorists are following you. And then you see a woman in a pink dress and you want to go pet your cat, like these sort of random events.
Right.
Sometimes those things are just nonsense. Sometimes those random thoughts end up creating novel insights that you actually do bring with you back out of your sleep that become useful for solving problems. Like if I was thinking about, oh, I have to go work on a story and I have to go find a source. It's one of the things investigative journalists do all the time. We have to find sources. I might come up with a novel way to contact a source in a dream without even realizing it, because the brain relaxes and goes through stuff. That's one function. Another main function is forgetting. Normally, throughout the day, we have so much experience. Like you're looking at me right now, we're talking, and you're getting all this information. You see that I'm wearing this orange shirt. I got some books behind me, some of my books, some of these, here's some Dungeons and Dragons books. Like it's all sorts of stuff here. And most of that information, you don't need to know that in the future. Tomorrow, you do not need to know that I was wearing an orange shirt. It is irrelevant to your life. But your brain, because it's a computer essentially,
Right.
collects
Processor.
all of that information and it clutters it all up in your head. If you didn't have a way to remove that information, you would get overloaded, your hard drive would be full. So what actually happens in dreams is it's deciding what information was salient and important and what information is not important. And so it's probably not going to remember my orange shirt. It's going to be like, forget that, but Scott maybe said 1 or 2 interesting things and I'll try to store these. And here's the fascinating thing about what dreams do, is they take your information from your day, everything you did, and they extract the interesting parts and combine it and compress it sort of like a zip file in a computer. So it becomes like it's discard, 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 but we'll just keep this stuff, and it kernelizes it and creates it. And that becomes sort of a central nugget of experience. And that gist, we could call it, that gist is an emotion. Like that, like these compressed ideas are how you feel about things. And we actually navigate the world in general, not because we're Vulcans, because we think about everything that's going on there and we're super logical. We navigate the world because of how we feel about things, because of things we've happened in the past. When you cross a street, you don't look at a car coming at you and you say, well, that car is moving at a predictable rate of 67 feet per second. There's 134 feet here. Therefore, I can make the crossing. No, you're not a Vulcan. You look at that car and you're like, huh, that feels like I might get squished. I'm not going to go in front of it. It was an emotion that did that. And that was actually because it had just compressed all this data from other events where you saw cars. And it created that emotion of like fear, essentially. And that is how we navigate the world. And it all happens in dreams. And one of the really great insights here is that, you know how you wake up in the morning and you didn't have a good night's sleep and you're sort of an asshole the rest of the day, right? Everything's wrong. Like, I'm just a mean person, and I will overreact to my wife or my kid or my pet or whatever. The reason you are like that is because you didn't get the emotional processing time to reduce those gists. So that information is sort of overloading your brain, and you feel like you become an asshole because you haven't actually gotten the emotional processing time. And so when I've spoken to some, a family therapist, for instance, who talk about, they're seeing couples in fights. The first thing that she says to clients who come into her, she's like, we're fighting about what, sex or money or whatever. The first thing she says is, well, how do you sleep? And she found that if she fixes the sleep, we don't need to talk about the other stuff because the other stuff sort of sorts itself out in a lot of cases. And so one of the things that I just love about the sleep research and the dream research is if you work on sleep and you get to become a good sleeper, a lot of the other things that you didn't realize were unrelated get better.
Is a couple of questions here that came up. One, is that because you're getting the rest, so the world doesn't seem as chaotic, number one. And number two, which was really my primary question that I wanted to ask, was about, are there ways, Scott, that we can kind of filter out what is the garbage in the dreams and what are the symbols that we need to glean information from that can help us lead our best lives?
A great question. First one, yes, it's just, you have just too much information. Too much information leads to emotional overload. Emotional overload makes you a bad person, right? So yes, exactly on the first one. The second part is really interesting, and I wish I could give you a good answer to it, but I can only give you a mediocre answer to it. Um, the what is important in a dream, when I asked a neuroscientist, his name was Adam Horowitz, he's over at MIT. I said, well, if dreams are so important, because it's not only humans that dream, just about every mammal dreams. And there's some indication that even a lot of insects dream. And even some people will suggest that plants dream. Like dreaming this, I mean, obviously the neurology would be different, but you do see sort of like these movements of physiological movements that are akin in a lot of living creatures. Um, I asked him, look, if dreams are so important, then why don't we remember them? And his response was, well, why do
Great
you
question.
think? Yeah. Well, then why do you? He said, well, why do you think the purpose is to remember them? Maybe the purpose is just to experience them.
Mm.
Like, and because we often think that we are our memories. Like, you think that you have this constant narrative that goes back to like your first memories or birth or maybe before birth. I don't know. Like, but the truth is that since dreams are discarding information all the time, you don't actually have a constant memory back to your beginning. You really just have right now and the thoughts that you're accessing your past. Like, I know you probably played a sport in high school. Maybe you didn't, but like you might have played a sport in high school.
Sure.
You're not thinking about the sport
Multiple.
right now.
Yep. Mhm.
Right, but it didn't come up in this conversation. This is the first time you thought about that sport in high school. It wasn't relevant right now until you just accessed it with your brain.
Mhm.
And and I think that it just became relevant, but your consciousness didn't need it. So for all intents and purposes, when we were talking 2 minutes ago, you didn't play a sport in high school. There was no relevant reason to bring that in. So in the question of what is important in a dream to actually remember, the only way I can answer it is to say your dreams are already doing what they're supposed to do. You don't need to influence them. If you do influence them, you might be changing the overall outcome.
Okay.
That can be beneficial in some cases, and we can go to in some other cases. But your question was like, what is actually useful to bring out in the future? Only the stuff that is useful to you. Right. And it's punting. It's saying like, look, if you had a dream that then you feel emotionally was meaningful because you had it, then it is meaningful.
Okay.
And that's the only way to answer that.
Okay. Scott Carney, investigative reporter. We're talking about his book Dream here on Guys Radio. Lucid dreaming, then, in terms of, are there ways, Scott, from your research that we can participate more in these dreams, or should we just be experiencing them?
Yeah. So neuroscientists hate lucid dreaming. Everyone I talked to about it, I was like, oh, so look, I asked the same question you did. And they're all like, lucid dreaming, that's not even dreaming. And and because if dreams are supposed to be automatic and it's supposed to be a thing that happens automatically in your brain, when you lucid dreaming does exist, like you can do it. You can focus on your hand, play with light switches. You can sort of become aware that you're in a dream world or you're not, but you actually don't get any emotional processing time. There's no clinical outputs that they have identified from lucid dreaming. It's more akin to entertainment. So if you want to get into lucid dreaming and you want to have a very entertaining, like your own movie, and you can do whatever you want. You can fly, you can have sex, you can read books, meet historical characters, whatever, you can do it. But physiologically, it does not appear to have the same restorative cognitive effects. It's sort of like an extension of actually being awake.
Yeah, but to me, it's if you could, it's another it's an alternate reality. It's a separate reality, as Castaneda said. If you can get into that dream and you can participate, you're living in another dimension at
Right.
that time. Instead
Mhm.
of just experiencing it around you, you're participating, but kind of a separate subject. How about the importance or lack of importance of keeping a dream journal? I kept a notebook, a composition book by my bed for a couple of years, and I'd wake up whenever it was in the middle of the night. It would be pitch black in the room. I'd just start writing, and
Yeah.
I'd wake up the next day and I'd have 5 pages written. And
Great. Yeah.
I didn't know what to do with them, but I felt that the process of writing them down, and I don't go back and read them, was helpful to me. And I don't know
Yeah.
how.
No, absolutely it was. I do it a sort of a different way. Sometimes I'll keep a notepad near my bed. And sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, God damn it, why am I not asleep? Right? This
Mhm.
is the feeling
Right.
that we usually have. I want to be asleep. And the truth is that you have these cycles. Naturally, humans are polyphasic, which means we have multiple sleep patterns. You have these 90-minute cycles.
Mhm.
Often there's just a natural break where humans are normally awake, and especially in the pre-electric lighting eras, you are normally awake for like 15 minutes or an hour at night, and then you go back to sleep. It was never a pathology until we started like having this sort of 9 to 5 attitude about sleep. And the anxiety you feel is like you feel like you should be asleep. I have found that instead of stressing out about those ruminations, I try to realize that my brain is very wide right now. I'm getting all of this extra, free association just because I'm very relaxed. And if I'm thinking about a thing that's getting on me, and you have a thing that's getting on you, I have
Mhm.
things that get on me. Um, I find that if my brain will run through scenarios about that thing, like, I don't know, I have to go file taxes. I'm like, how am I going to file taxes in a way that minimizes my exposure or whatever,
Mhm.
right? I will then write down the idea that came to me after like 5, 10 minutes of rumination. I will put that in the notebook. And the fascinating thing is after I've ruminated and written it down, I fall right back to sleep because my brain's like, okay, you did something with it. And I'd say about 50% of the time that rumination was useful. Like literally, I was like, oh my God, that was a good insight. I can use this. I can actually do something with
Do you
this.
think writing it down kind of locks it in terms of a learning mode for you?
I do. I think that that creative space allows you to think, and 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 then it wants a solution. It wants to put it as an output, and making it you make it concrete when you write it down. It
Mhm.
becomes the output, and the brain's like, cool, you can take care of that later.
Okay,
and
got it.
and for me, that works really well. In terms of like a dream journal, like, do I really want to remember every moment of the dreams? I have not done that. That's not really what I was interested in. But if you find that it was useful for you, then it was useful because
Mhm.
your brain is creating these abstract thoughts for it's thinking about these things for some reason.
Mhm.
Why not record it and realize that it might just be nonsense?
Right,
But what if it's not? Like, what if there was something really cool there? I try not to like over stress anything. Remember, it's not
right.
dreams are always perfect or they're always nonsense. It's really how you adapt and use those later in the integration
Yeah,
period.
yeah. I think when you write it down, there's a possibility that by just doing that and reviewing, there's kind of a subconscious review. You might glean something there, like, oh, that's what this dream was trying to
Mhm.
tell me, possibly. So that's kind of
Yeah,
cool. I want to ask you
totally.
the real money question here, Scott, from your research. So many Americans are sleep deprived, and so many
Yeah,
people have trouble falling asleep. You mentioned a couple of methods in the book, the Yoga Nidra and also the Rosenberg Protocol, I think.
right.
What are some ways that you can help our audience in terms of ways they may be able to be helped fall asleep?
Yeah, the most important one is charge your cell phone in another room. Like I kid you not, like that is the most important because these devices just what happens is people have this tendency to as before they fall asleep they scroll through stuff,
Right,
which is
right, right.
focused, right? Your eyes are literally focused at something that's only a few inches from your face, right? And and you're getting this information like maybe something bad happened in politics, right? And then
Maybe.
you yeah, maybe something bad happened in the government. And then that's priming your sleep. That's priming you to dream about that stuff. Because the next thing you do is you put it down and then you try to sleep, but you've just given all that information. It's much better to wind down slowly.
Mhm.
Read a book. Just meditate, just zone out, and do that sort of stuff is really, really useful first. The other thing is like it's like the power of ritual. What is a ritual? A ritual is just something that you create with an intention behind it. It doesn't need to be big. It doesn't need to be like a high Catholic mass or a shamanic retreat in the
Mhm.
doing ayahuasca in the
Right,
in
right.
Peru. Like it can just be like a thing that you do that is meaningful to you, and by giving it meaning, it helps you fall asleep. So reading a book could be your ritual to fall asleep, um, and that stuff is
It is.
really, really important.
It is mine. Yeah.
It's a
It,
great one. It's an
it
awesome one
helps.
because
It really helps.
it's slower. And the Rosenberg protocol, and I have a few others that I talk about, is very simple. It's an eye movement thing where you lie down on your back and you stretch and then you move your eyes all the way to the right for like 10 seconds, 15 seconds. You bring them back to the center and then you move them all the way to the left for a while. You bring it back to the center and you're just doing this as a physiological action to prime yourself for sleep, to
Mhm.
balance the sides of your body, to balance your experience, to do something that you don't usually do. It's not hard, but creating a ritual, any ritual, um, will start to connect your body to your mind and allow you to do things that are your desires. And if you make the eye movement your desire to go to sleep, it creates that placebo response for you.
Awesome. My special guest on Guys Radio, the fascinating investigative reporter and best-selling author, Scott Carney. We talked about the book today, Dream, the Art and Science of Slumber. Scott, tell everybody where they can learn more about you.
So I have a really active YouTube channel, Scott Carney on YouTube, and a podcast called Scott Carney Investigates. Those are the best place if you want to see my constant stream of somewhat interesting ideas. Go there. Also, my website, scottcarney.com. Put my name into Google, things will come up, and then you can choose your own adventure.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad you came on the show. There's so many other books and so many other topics, including what it's like to be an investigative reporter and journalist, rather. And I hope you'll come back and you did a great job. Thank you so much, Scott.
Right. Let me know.
Okay.
Thanks.
If you enjoy the guests and content I bring you each and every week to Guys TV and Guys Radio, please support us by subscribing to our channels and platforms. Thank you.